The last decade has seen a decline in the rule of law in some EU member states. Against this backdrop, the question is increasingly raised whether the Union can effectively protect its finances against violations of democratic principles in its member states. In January 2021, the EU took an important step against the misuse of its budget by adopting so-called conditionality regulation, which for the first time linked EU finances to respect for the rule of law. Under this regulation, the EU can protect its budget by taking action against those countries that do not respect the rule of law. But the result of an audit by the European Court of Auditors to assess the effectiveness of this mechanism warns that EU finances are not yet immune to breaches of the rule of law. In a special report published on 22nd of February, they found that while the conditionality regulation strengthens the EU's rule of law framework, its application faces challenges. The lack of human resources, the absence of a solid IT infrastructure for case management, and the lack of clear operational guidelines were all identified as shortcomings of the system. Speaking at the report's press briefing, ECA member Annemie Turtelboom pointed to inconsistencies in the EU's approach to breaches of the rule of law, with the application of the conditionality regulation appearing to vary from one member state to another. There is also a risk that even with the application of the conditionality regulation, the risks to the EU's financial interests may not be eliminated, in particular in the short term, where the blocking of EU funds may hinder the achievement of EU policy objectives. On the other hand, it is important to ensure that corrective measures are translated into fundamental reforms in all countries and are not just a tick-box exercise.
Now I will just give one example. Simply declaring that an integrity authority has been set up does not necessarily mean that the fight against corruption will be effective. Such a box-ticking would be a missed opportunity to improve the situation in a given member state.
The court found that certain aspects of the rule are difficult for the member states to implement. It therefore proposes a number of recommendations, such as a more systematic and evidence-driven approach to identification, assessment and documentation of infringements, and a more rigorous evaluation of effectiveness of sanctions. The ECA also recommends improving the rule of law framework in future legislative proposals.